let's say you're in like a sailboat sailing from like one port to the next. During hypergrowth, within each new port, by the time you take that new direction, your boat's already like, 2x, 3x the size. Like you become a lot less nimble by the time you get to that next port of call, and it gets harder to change direction. So especially as you scale during hypergrowth, you get to get those decisions and that coordination right. Otherwise, like changing direction while also building the boat becomes very, very difficult.
What's up, everyone? Well, if you live in Austin, Texas, like I do, you have seen a billboard or a bus or a park bench that says something about ClickUp. Finally, I had to go to the website and say, what the heck is this company? And today, we're very fortunate to have Tommy Wang, head of Global Revenue at ClickUp, join us on the show, which is just one of these companies that their trajectory is absolutely insane. I think they've 100x revenue in 2 years, which is unbelievable. And I just really don't even know if I've seen a company grow quite this fast. And so Tommy was a very early part of the ClickUp team and has been able to scale with it, and comes on the show today and just really talks about a lot of his lessons. Things like talent density and the importance of that early on, as well as when you're earlier in your career, when you perhaps haven't seen and done everything, how do you even know what best in class looks like? How are you able to identify an A player when you're, frankly, pretty early in your career? And so we talk about frameworks and ideas for that. And I think, one of the interesting things for those folks that are interested in the concept of product-led growth, of self-serve businesses is, the nuance of building out a go-to-market engine for products that have a ton of complexity that brings power, but also getting the actual usage and adoption in a way that isn't just super reliant upon people and services. And so it was a very interesting topic for us and at Troops, because we're very in that part of our business transition now. And Tommy was spot on with the way that he thought about things.
Absolutely, Scott. I mean, if you've heard some of the other episodes for the listeners out there, you probably know that this is something I've been thinking a lot about, and talking to Tommy and sitting down and hearing what he thinks about activation, the product metrics he cares about the most, and how he thinks about letting sales teams engage at the right time to really facilitate a go-to-market process that works best for these types of softwares was fascinating.
Well, let's get into it. Let's hear from Tommy Wang at ClickUp. Tommy, what's going on, man?
That's good. Scott, Andrei, great to be here.
It's great to have you here. And it's not often that I go on LinkedIn and I see a company's employee count 1,000 plus on the 2-year growth. I don't know if I've ever actually seen that. So that's pretty awesome, man.
I think we're still a little bit shy of 1,000 right now. But yeah, it's definitely been a big up the last few years.
That's amazing. So let's just frame this up. We were talking about for the episode, I'm seeing ClickUp everywhere. I'm seeing it on billboards. Andrei's seeing it on buses, metros. ClickUp global domination is imminent. But what do you guys do for the people that might not necessarily be familiar with the product?
Yeah, I mean, ClickUp started as something a lot simpler, right? Hey, like the founder, he was building a very separate business with a small team. They were within like a 10-person team already using at that point 7-8 different tools. Just getting drawn to whether it's for engineering or marketing or even for just like simple project management into very different workflows. And then the data didn't connect. Like the data was very siloed between these different systems, and people were just asking like the same questions to each other, even on like a 10-person team. So when we built this tool initially, it was very much, hey, like let's get all of our tasks, all of our workflows into a single app and keep it there. And then 2, as it grew, whether you go from the tasks and foundations level to that next level, or to the level beyond, which is like integrations and connectivity, you wanted to really create like a one single unified product experience for everything that a company has to do workflow wise. The best way to understand us is that we are like a work management app that can be used by engineers, marketers, designers, you name it.
Love it, hear it. And I can hear you used to be a VC, right? You used to be at Summit. I have had a lot of friends do the summit grind. And the immediate question that comes to mind is, okay, does the world really need another productivity workflow management app, right? You have, folks like Monday, Asana, the Jira suite. There's a zillion tools to kind of organize and manage our work. I guess, was there a unique insight that allowed you guys to create a wedge in the market?
For sure. I mean, the question you're asking is probably the same one that I had in my first couple of weeks of even meeting Zeb. It's the one that every VC asked when he went out for the first round of conversations, even two and a half years ago. And back then, I think the popular mantra was, hey, build for a vertical, build for a niche, go very specific. But then that also means that you can't be like a $100 billion business. You can only be like a single-digit $1 billion business. It's like the markets in each of these industries isn't big enough to individually support that. The insight that Zeb had, which was very much built on the user level, this is a very user level insight, was that you have to build configurability and flexibility into your tool to suit different minds. People don't all want to work the same way, like whether a designer or an engineer or a project manager. Like, our minds are hardwired differently, and we want to work in the way that feels the most natural to us, to even visualize information the way that feels the most natural to us, and to allow for those, to accommodate all those different mindsets. You want to build a tool that can be rearranged almost with building blocks into that perfect interface for each person, each team, each functional use case, each type of company. And because of that, what we've seen with ClickUp is the fastest growth of any work management tool out there, right? Like Asana, Monday, all these others came before, but comparing us to their relative, them at 3 years old, 4 years old, we're growing, multiple faster. And right now, the growth has been incredible the last year, and we only expected it to get better in the years ahead. More and more foundations are being laid out right now.
That's amazing. It just reminds me of when we started our company, which basically brings data and workflow into messaging, which is people just understand it, they get it. We would say, software needs to adapt to humans, not humans adapt to software. And I think in many ways, what you're talking about is giving people that canvas, right? That is aligned with the way that they like to work. And one of the things that I've noticed is that can be a gift and a curse. Specifically, it is the flexibility which allows you to go into any solution and say, let me kind of solution sell, problem solve, and we can adapt this to solve your problem. Great. Love it. The challenge is you can do anything to everybody. And it's like people have difficulty cognitively wrapping their head around that, either from an onboarding perspective, a sales perspective. They're like, what is this thing? And what do I use it for? And so A, is what I just said sound familiar? And if it does, how have you guys tackled that Swiss Army knife challenge that often comes with a flexible solution like you have?
Yeah, it's one of the oldest problems, right? With complexity comes power, but also with that power comes more complexity. You have to solve for that somehow. The way that we think and build is that we want to create simplicity for users and power for admins. So you won't ever have a situation where every single user in a ClickUp instance, or even a Jira instance, or a Monday instance, has the same recognition of how to use all those different features, tools, all the bells and whistles, right? You get a whole buffet menu of things that you could do with it, but someone needs to really have that vision for how to architect the system and how to set it up for their teams and their different end users to first onboard and then to gradually learn on their own. The way we look at it is today, a lot of what's really helped drive our growth is just organic product growth. Users tell each other about us in a way that's almost infectious. We are seeing more inbound undriven traffic than we'd ever expect. I mean, even now to this day, almost 80-90% of our traffic is just really freemium word of mouth.
My heart goes out to you.
It's a great problem to have, right? It's a great problem to have. At the same time, when those users come in, we don't often know what they want, right? We don't know what the use case we're trying to tailor us to is. So it takes time to learn. What we're looking to do is a couple of things. One, we want to build out an onboarding process that really helps simplify and abstract away a lot of that kind of initial setup complexity for different use cases. So whether with templates or with humans in the loop to help, we want people to really understand, understand high level how to architect and how to set up the tool. And then secondarily, they can really figure out all the different bells and whistles on their own as they dive in and then as they start interacting with team members. Two, what can be really important is this concept of community-driven education. If you listen to some of our YouTube videos on ClickUp and those how-to manuals, a lot of them actually come from not from even our company, but from these third-party consultants who just very much sprang up again organically because they saw how powerful the tool was. They knew how many other businesses needed something like this, and they started actually forming their own little micro businesses, consulting for others. Right now, I think we have a network of almost over 400 consultants, all really diving in to help small teams of 5, 50, even 500 pick up and learn the tool. So this concept can be also applied to those user communities and those champion communities as we kind of build more Facebook groups and build more forums where people can actually help answer one another's questions, right? Unlock a lot of that imagination up front. The last piece is beyond the community and beyond the onboarding flow. We also want to give users as much resourcing as possible from a services standpoint. So many companies don't ever really build out much of a services function until much later on. We're not building a massive do it for you services function. We're building a really strong, very targeted, let me help design this for you function. So we want our services function internally to be almost the transformation experts, as in how do you bring your current processes and your current ways of doing things into a better way that we've seen replicated across thousands of businesses to make you more productive, to make you more transparent as a business, and also just get more done. What people care about fundamentally nowadays is velocity. How fast can I get work done? How fast can I get product shipped? And how fast can I add that incremental dollar?
So let's talk about the human side of things. Everything you said makes a lot of sense to me. I've seen it time and time again. I think where things get a little bit more interesting for our audience, which is a lot of B2B revenue leaders, a lot of CEOs, is the engagement model. Once someone, signs up, whatever. And it sounds like you guys have some type of onboarding specialist type of person. Is that an explicit role? Is it the salesperson? Kind of lay out what that engagement model looks like.
There's really two tracks, right? If you are an account that is more of a sales assisted, a conversion, you usually talk to sales reps and solutions engineers, folks who are really articulate in helping you understand how to use it for XYZ business use cases, because usually you hear a lot of the same patterns. With the freemiums, with the freemium side though, right? The freemium conversions, a lot of those self-serve conversions, we're actually looping in these coaching specialists, folks that we've trained to be just world-class support agents, and also to be almost the on-demand admin for your team to really help you understand how to set up your instance, and then 2, how to create your first couple workflows. It gets you started, and the rest is on you, of course. But the initial piece is helping activate those insights. If you've been through the onboarding process for, let's say, Superhuman, you have an idea about how that feels, right? Someone's almost helping manage you through the first couple learning steps, forcing you to do it yourself. They're not doing it for you; they're helping you do it. And then once you've been through that initial activation phase of, hey, all right, got it, this product clicks, you just never really lose it. You start learning more and more. And we've seen the activation across those user cohorts be a lot stronger.
How do you regulate that for cost effectiveness? I think about the lifetime value of an individual user, and it's kind of I don't know what your product costs what does your product cost per month?
The product is priced at $5 for the lower tier plan. It's the unlimited. We have $9 per month for the business, $19 for our business plus, and then enterprise is starting at $29 and going upwards.
Awesome. So I hear that, and I'm throwing people at onboarding all of those people at the price point, unless there's a 3-year lifetime value, is just really, the economics are tough. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's my initial gut instinct. And so I guess, yeah, I would just be interested to unpack that. How do you think about putting humans against onboarding as many people as you can? Who gets a call, who doesn't? I would be interested to understand that.
Exactly. So there's a couple of things that we're using right now to refine the model. One is the cost model. We've pretty much nailed down to science. We know how much we can pay people and how much we can groom these folks internally. So many of our coaches are coming directly from support, right? They're not paid at like the 80, 100, and like maybe even like 120 that like you might see in like Success or like in the Bay Area. Folks are coming in at like a much more reasonable like headcount cost. Two, we also have like a pretty good analytics team that is now releasing a screening model, Monocle, that should be helping us understand within our different user signups, even from the first couple of days or first couple of hours of behavior, who is likely to convert, and then secondarily, who is likely to convert with room for expansion. The third piece of like what helps justify this is that looking at our metrics, like our net dollar retention is off the charts. So it's like well north of 150%. And from what we've seen, if we can find and really help these power users get started, like we'll be accountable for like one, sharing our product to like a ton more teams, but then two, bring their own teams since like a very consistent and like enduring customer. Our churn right now today is still like trending closer to like 1%, on like a gross basis. So overall, like the user cohorts we're looking at, even if they're SMB, even if they're like even micro SMB, are still relatively speaking like very healthy.
So, Tommy, this is getting really interesting, and thank you so much for sharing those details. I'm a big fan of all free trials, freemium, product-led growth, and it feels like it's picking up in the market in general. I think something that comes to mind when I hear you talk about this is when you were assessing what the activation moment was. I would love to hear what that exactly is in ClickUp and how you decided that was the point at which a user is activated, and then two, how do you guys stimulate the continued growth and learning of the products within the platform post that activation phase?
Those are the hardest questions to answer right now, actually. It's like we've grown so fast that a lot of the things we used to do like don't translate now into the future. We need to scale those those ways of thinking. On the first part, right? Like, we think about activation in two steps, like the actual like behavioral onboarding activation, and then separately the monetization activation. The monetization activation, we know what the triggers are. Usually people hit like different paywalls in the product. They start using it and they realize, hey, we actually want to use this for like a more expanded use case or like a bigger team use case. And eventually folks convert naturally oftentimes because they realize there are constraints to like that freemium plan and that what you actually want to use this for is like a larger, more expanded use case. The conversion trigger, so for the initial kind of behavioral onboarding, we're still experimenting with quite a bit. We know that different actions for sure indicate a broader acceptance of a team, like teamwork. One is just, at mentioning like users in one of our tasks. Another is like assigning tasks. There are these interactions that we know really matter. Right now, we're ironing down over the next year, especially as we kind of build a very robust like product analytics team. We want to iron out what is exactly that like a conversion trigger that is the true north, right? Like which metric are we angling towards or optimizing for that gets as many users activated as possible from the get-go. But yeah, today like we have a couple different theses and we're tracking that data now across like all of our new signups. But there's no one single clear metric yet that we're like, hey, this is true north.
Yeah, that makes sense. That magic moment, it's so hard, especially when you don't. Like you really need scale, and it sounds like you guys are getting scale, but still in that world of like flexibility, it can be quite challenging. One of the things you talked about early on, we were talking just kind of about in this phase, the importance of talent density. And I think this is something that's very easy to talk about and claim, but the reality is I think there's a lot of people out there that, they talk about building talent density and it's kind of like everybody thinks they're Harvard. Like everybody thinks they're amazing. And the reality is like very few people are. And so like, what have you learned by taking this approach? And then I have a few follow-up questions for you.
So this started it started at one level and right now it's kind of like cascading out into like over different levels of recruiting. The initial impetus for this was that when we first started hiring for folks, right? Like when we were still 20 people scaling to 40 to 100, you didn't really have a built-out network. Like you didn't have like a robust network of like warm referrals to go off of, right? When we started like looking at other companies to hire from, we usually went in, and this is a lot of my doing early on. I'd ask around actually, and as in, hey, like who are your strongest, peers and coworkers? Who do you want to work with again? within a couple of these initial conversations, you have a pretty strong idea of who the top talents are from within like a certain ecosystem, a certain company. And when you pull out those those top performers, like the rising stars, like the culture carriers, usually you can bring over the 5 or 10 others that you want as well. So initially, when we first built, we were actually collecting over like a lot of these, like honestly the top people from several other businesses, starting to like see that initial talent pool. Later on, as we started getting into more executive recruiting, hiring top down versus bottoms up, this got a lot easier because now you can actually back channel. You can back channel a lot easier, like across like, your own active networks. And for each of our executive hires, we basically we just have not compromised on like excellence. We've interviewed like over, I think by the time we found Shailesh, our head of global engineering, we'd already interviewed over well over 100 VPs of Eng and CTOs. The difference is that, as we really looked at the orgs that they built and also just the way that they thought about the business, there was still like a gap that we felt like, hey, just didn't quite index to what is, best in class. And the way that you really figure out what best in class is anchored at is you find the very best leaders in your industry that you can't hire, right? The people that are not going to leave their positions, but they are known by reputation to be some of the strongest leaders. Talk to them first, get that initial benchmark of what great looks like, and then pattern match against it. Because then you won't end up making a decision out of haste where you talk to someone who sounds pretty good and you have no reason not to hire them and you end up hiring them.
Yeah. I mean, that's really smart. Did you guys enlist any of those people as advisors to actually become a part of the interview process?
Sometimes we did, actually. So for that head of global engineering role, right, between Zeb, myself, and Alex, we haven't ever hired a VP of engineering before. We actually enlisted a couple other VPs of engineering and a couple of friendly ones that we knew to help us screen the person that we did eventually hire, Shailesh.
That's awesome. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you, because how big is ClickUp now? About 550, 600 people?
Yeah, we're just under 600 right now.
Okay. And then when did you join? How big was the company?
2 years ago, I think I was employee number 30, actually.
Okay. So you've gone from 30 to 550. I mean, you were an investor before this, and here you are, global head of revenue. How have you managed yourself?
It hasn't been perfectly smooth. No one transitions from operating in an early stage or operating as an investor to being like a phenomenal exec overnight. It takes a lot of practice, and also just takes a lot of self-reflection. The things that I did that were really helpful is that, looking at my background compared to the role I'm in today, a lot of people would say that you shouldn't scale, or as this person shouldn't have scaled this far or even continue scaling. The 3 things I can say to anyone who is in that similar position that will help you out tremendously is 1, try to learn as much historical context as you can from other companies and other relevant situations. You don't need the experience, you need the context. If you don't have the context, you make poor decisions. Play that historical context out into the future as best you can to help inform how you craft your strategies and how you assemble your teams and how you really kind of build ahead. Because the problem with the hypergrowth is that, let's say you're in a sailboat or a speedboat sailing from one port to the next. During hypergrowth, within each new port, by the time you take that new direction, by the time you get there, your boat's already 2x, 3x the size. You become a lot less nimble by the time you get to that next port of call, and it gets harder to change direction. So especially as you scale during hypergrowth, you have to get those decisions and that coordination right. Otherwise, changing direction while also building the boat becomes very, very difficult. That's what usually overwhelms people. 2, you need to know when to hire to take pressure off yourself. There's no way in hell that all the things I did when I first joined could have scaled if I kept doing those things as well as what I do today. The only way you can get ahead of that growth is by hiring for the right roles, the right leaders, and then building the right teams to give away your Legos at all the right moments, so that people around you have that ownership too, that kind of take on that responsibility, that you're not just choking all flow of information or all decision making to yourself. The first couple of leaders I brought on, honestly, without each and every one of them, I would have been drowning. I would have drowned already. When our first sales manager came on, he took a ton of pressure off me because we had at that point almost 15 reps. I couldn't manage 15 reps and also do my job at the same time. When Matt, our head of commercial sales, came on, he really kind of stepped into that vacuum of really owning the sales piece that could help build out the pre and post sales, so I could really focus on let's say finance, biz ops, legal, and so on. All these other functions, become very important very fast. And if you don't have the time to kind of build those functions, doesn't matter how far ahead sales is, you're still gonna run into a bunch of pain.
Absolutely. It's funny you said giving away your Legos. We had Dave Groh, the president and chief operating officer at Lucid a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned the same thing. And I think he went through a very similar career process to what you're experiencing now. So it's really cool to speak to both of you guys. Something that comes to mind for me when hearing about this experience is just what in particular has been the most challenging part of this transition? Like, what did you really have to learn the most about and dig deep into? And then more importantly, as you look forward today, what are you focused on learning more or getting better at today?
See, looking back, you can't really isolate any one thing that you had to learn. It's a lot of like micro learnings, right? It's like the same as how you build a product initially. You don't build it by just like having the overall vision and doing everything that leads up to it in like one single fell swoop. You do it by incrementalism, right? Like you test, you iterate, you try to course correct if you make mistakes and do it as fast and as rapidly as possible. Honestly, like a lot of what I did early on was just, I brute forced it. Like I just kind of worked like pretty intense hours and did more of everything to kind of like to basically put my eggs in different baskets. As you kind of find those initial winners, you double down those winners and you really kind of capitalize on like the ones that succeed versus like, spending the equal amount of resources on the ones that don't work out as well. You want to make a couple you want to always get quick wins, accumulate those quick wins while also like making those strategic bets. But looking ahead, that's a lot easier of a question to answer. The biggest thing that we have to learn now as a business is like how to improve our communication and our cadences across now 500 plus people. Because when you hit 500 people, a lot of things change in the org. And then later on, as you hit 2,000 people, which will be here very, very soon for us, just a couple of years away, even more changes. My perspective is that a lot of teams, when they hit that initial inflection point of 150 even, because they don't have a tool, usually something like ClickUp, honestly, if you don't have a tool that creates that visibility, that cross-functional, collaboration and to document and to to really document and share and to collaborate in one single space on tasks and on work, you lose sight of what other teams are doing. Because at 150, our minds, our human minds don't at that point associate hey, this is one team. This is not a team anymore. This is a tribe with multiple different teams, multiple different squads. We didn't feel that pain as much at 150 just because by nature we were more organized using our own tool. But later on, as you really dig ahead into what happens once we're 500, we're feeling a lot of that pain out today, right? Inter-team communication, cross-functional, initiatives need a lot more support and a much more concerted effort to communicate and over-communicate. There's a couple of key hires that we'll be making. One, a chief of staff role to help ensure organizational visibility and accountability, especially for those key initiatives. Our head of comms hire, Danielle, she came over from Atlassian not too long ago, and she's been massively impactful in one kind of architecting our overall message, both an external as well as cascading comms internally, and then separately we'll be probably bringing on a VP of business operations to really help us drive top level financial discipline, help us understand how these different metrics tie and really are impacted by the work of each of these different teams and even individuals on the ground.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you have any tips for things that you guys have done, over the past 6 months that have made a big impact.
Org structure, make the org structure clear today. Also how it's changing. Really over communicate on what things will look like in 3 months and 6 months and so on. Help people understand that, especially folks who've been here for a longer time, that even though you're giving away parts of your job and your duties and your title and everything else will change over the next couple of years, there's an infinite amount of room for growth, right? You can't grow unless you have time and capacity to take that stuff on. So you actually do want to give away your Legos. Honestly, one of the best ways to improve yourself is to give away what you do well and to do the things that you haven't done before, right? To get the chance to try.
Yeah, it's interesting. I struggle with that one. There's a school of thought that's kind of round yourself out. And then there's also the school of thought that's more double down on your bliss, double down what you're uniquely exceptional at, hire around that. And hire that because you know what really good looks like, which I think is one of the contrarian things that I have learned is if you are really good at something, you should hire for it. You know what good looks like because you're good at it. That's not at least what I used to think. Tommy, this has been a 2-ish year journey for you. What's been the biggest inflection point at ClickUp?
Honestly, you can point to all these different financial, metrics, right? You can point to when we got to 10 million ARR, when we got to 50. when you click past 100, like these outside figures all matter, right? Like seeing like the Series A, the Series B, these different like funding rounds, all of them do matter to some extent. But internally, it feels very different. It's like there's no, you haven't improved dramatically as a business by raising it around. What you have done though is like really proven that like the work that you put in over the last like year or 2 years, like earns you a certain valuation, earns you a certain like appreciation from investors and from future employees. I think the biggest inflection point by far is the last happened in the last like 3 to 4 months when we brought on our first cohort of outside execs, folks who are very experienced and very much like world class at what they do. Like these folks that like offers from pretty much every other company they talk to and could have like gone to, and they somehow bought into our vision, really like believe in us and chose to like invest the next 5 years of their life into building this thing with us. Like I am very, very eternally grateful for all of our employees, but especially for the ones who like took that big of a chance. They had the whole world before them. Like they could have gone to any, whatever, Sequoia, Excel, like Andreessen backed business and been like Shailesh could have been like a VP event or CTO. Dan, our head of finance, she could have been like a CFO in many places, but they chose to come over and really be like part of something greater, because what we saw was, hey, like this team, it has like those early signs of brilliance. Is like we have the ability to scale, and then 2, this market is phenomenal. Team matters a lot, but I will still admit that market matters most. You put the world's like you put an above average team in the world's greatest market, that team will far outperform the world's best team in like a very average market.
Yeah, 100%. No, you got to pick your spots. There's so much leverage in picking the right market. I remember when we were doing our seed round, first round capital, so like we look for 3 things in this order. First, market. Second, team. Third, idea. And that always really stuck with me, because that's not always what you index on when you're thinking about starting a business. I need a good idea. But if you're in the right market, you can eventually figure that out. Tommy, we got to wrap things up, but thank you so much for coming on. I am fired up for you guys. I actually wrote down on my to-dos here that I need to just sign up for a trial of ClickUp and just give this a whirl. And yeah, congrats, man. I mean, it sounds like you're at a very exciting place right now, and the sky's the limit.
Yeah, no, it's been a thrill. It's been really fun.
For people that want to stay in touch with you, ClickUp, what's the best way for them to do that?
Just shoot me an email. Tommy@clickup.com, and follow along. We have like obviously a presence on all of our social channels, and we have a couple big announcements coming out soon.
Ooh, nice. I'm excited. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star on any of the sites, and we'll see you guys next time.